Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most fascinating military developments of the last few years, how Ukraine transformed its long-range strike capabilities from early use of HIMARS to deploying advanced Western missiles like Storm Shadow. This evolution didn't just change the battlefield, it reshaped the strategic landscape of the entire conflict. In this video, we're going to unpack how Ukraine did it, what changed over time, and why these capabilities matter far beyond the front lines. So settle in, because this story is as much about ingenuity and adaptation as it is about hardware and technology. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion in early 2022, Ukraine's long-range strike arsenal was extremely limited. Much of its Soviet-era missile inventory, like ATACMS, U and Smerch rockets, was outdated, inaccurate, or depleted. Ukraine could defend, but striking deep behind Russian lines with precision was nearly impossible. Kiev pushed urgently for Western systems, arguing that without long-range precision strike capability, it couldn't disrupt Russian logistics chains, ammunition depots, or command centers that were driving the invasion forward. Western partners were cautious at first, concerned about escalation, but the battlefield realities quickly made the need undeniable. The first major breakthrough came with the introduction of the American HIMARS platform. HIMARS quickly became a symbol of precision, mobility, and disruptive power. Its arrival in June 2022 fundamentally shifted the dynamics of the conflict. Ukraine suddenly had the ability to hit targets with extraordinary accuracy, up to around 80 kilometers using HIMARS rockets. This wasn't long range by global standards, but compared to what Ukraine had before, it was a quantum leap. Within weeks, HIMARS strikes began taking out Russian ammunition depots, bridge crossings, headquarters, and key logistics nodes. Russian forces felt the effects immediately and began pulling critical assets farther from the front lines, complicating their supply efforts and slowing their offensives. The key to HIMARS wasn't just the rockets, it was the targeting process. Ukrainian forces combined Western intelligence data, satellite imagery, drone reconnaissance, and local resistance networks to create a level of battlefield awareness they had never had before. HIMARS didn't operate in isolation. It became part of a broader kill chain that involved real-time reconnaissance, rapid data sharing, and precision execution. Ukraine mastered this kill chain faster than many expected, allowing it to maximize the effectiveness of every rocket fired. Western officials were impressed by how efficiently Ukraine used the system, often achieving strategic results with minimal ammunition. But as effective as HIMARS was, its range limitations became obvious. Russia adapted by moving depots and command posts beyond 80 kilometers. Ukraine needed something more powerful, something that could reach deep into Russian-held territory without wasting scarce resources. That need pushed the conversation toward long-range missiles like ATACMS and Storm Shadow. Getting these was not easy. There were heated debates among Western governments about escalation risks and concerns about striking inside Russia. Ukraine had to prove not only that it needed these weapons, but also that it could use them responsibly and within agreed boundaries. Before Storm Shadow arrived, ATACMS became the next turning point. At first, Ukraine received an older, cluster, warhead variant with a shorter range. Even these limited ATACMS proved devastating against Russian airfields, helicopters, and ammunition stockpiles in occupied territory. The missiles struck with precision at distances HIMARS couldn't reach, surprising Russian commanders who had believed certain sites were safe. Later, Ukraine received longer-range ATACMS capable of hitting up to 300 kilometers. These strikes targeted critical infrastructure like air bases, radar systems, and naval assets in Crimea. Each successful attack weakened Russia's ability to project power over the Black Sea and the occupied territories. Then came one of the most important developments of all, the arrival of the British and French, developed Storm Shadow and Scow, BG cruise missiles. These were not just an incremental improvement, they represented a leap into a different class of precision strike capability. Storm Shadow could reach over 250 kilometers with pinpoint accuracy, but its true power lay in its low-altitude flight profile and advanced guidance systems. It could fly under radar coverage, navigate complex terrain, and hit specific buildings or bunkers deep within fortified positions. For Ukraine, this meant that high-altitude targets in Crimea or along heavily defended regions were suddenly within reach. The use of Storm Shadow quickly changed Russian defensive behavior. Command centers, ammunition depots, and air bases that had been considered untouchable became vulnerable overnight. Ukrainian strikes hit port facilities, naval ships, air defense positions, and strategic sites across Crimea. These missiles were part of broader operations that included drones, decoys, and cyber elements to overwhelm Russian defenses. Ukraine learned to combine its missile strikes with electronic warfare, satellite tracking, and coordinated attacks to maximize the impact. Storm Shadow didn't just destroy buildings, it shattered the assumption that Russia could operate safely in occupied territory. One of the most notable outcomes of these strikes was the weakening of Russian naval dominance in the Black Sea. Ukraine destroyed or damaged key ships of the Black Sea Fleet, including landing ships and even a submarine. Storm Shadow played a major role in attacks on Sevastopol's dry docks, naval repair facilities, and command centers. These strikes forced Russia to move much of its fleet eastward to Novorossiysk, reducing its ability to threaten Ukraine's coast or enforce a naval blockade. This directly contributed to Ukraine reopening grain export routes, something that had global implications. The success of Ukraine's long-range strategy wasn't just about technology. It was about creativity. Ukraine modified Soviet-era drones into long-range strike platforms, developed indigenous missiles like the Neptune, and even experimented with repurposed anti-ship missiles for land attacks. Each successful domestic innovation strengthened Ukraine's case for receiving more advanced Western systems by showing that it could integrate them effectively. This also meant Ukraine wasn't entirely dependent on Western supply lines, giving it greater operational flexibility and reducing political risk. Ukraine's ability to adapt also came from building layered strategies. Short-range drones monitored enemy movements. HIMARS disrupted supply lines. ATACMS struck media-range targets. Storm Shadow hit high-altitude deep assets. Together, these systems formed a comprehensive strike network that could damage Russian forces across the entire theater. Ukraine essentially constructed a modern, distributed, precision strike capability from scratch in less than 2 years, something few countries could have done even with decades of planning. At the same time, the political dimension of acquiring these weapons shouldn't be overlooked. Ukraine had to engage in constant diplomacy to reassure partners, negotiate rules of engagement, and build trust that advanced Western missiles would be used responsibly. Western intelligence agencies closely monitored Ukrainian use of long-range weapons, and Ukraine consistently demonstrated discipline. This trust was part of why additional systems kept coming, and why restrictions gradually loosened over time. What began with cautious support evolved into deeper military cooperation, as partners saw Ukraine's professionalism and effectiveness. Even with these successes, challenges remained. Western stockpiles were limited, and producing more missiles took time. Russian air defenses adapted, improving interception rates and relocating more systems to critical areas like Crimea. Ukraine had to continually adjust its tactics, increase the use of decoys, and find new ways to penetrate Russian defenses. But despite these obstacles, Ukraine kept achieving high-value hits, often using complex multi-step operations involving drones, missiles, and cyber elements working together. Another important factor was intelligence sharing. Ukraine benefited from real-time satellite data, signals intelligence, and tracking information provided by Western countries. This allowed Ukraine to identify when Russian commanders were present at key facilities, when ammunition shipments were moving, or when aircraft were vulnerable on the ground. This intelligence-to-strike cycle became one of Ukraine's most powerful advantages, especially with long-range weapons. The precision and timing of many strikes would not have been possible without this integrated support network. The evolution from HIMARS to Storm Shadow also marked Ukraine's entry into the era of modern Western military doctrine. Instead of relying on massed artillery barrages, Ukraine increasingly embraced precision strikes, mobility, electronic warfare, and network-centric operations. This shift wasn't just tactical. It represented a fundamental transformation in how Ukraine approached warfare. Training, planning, logistics, and targeting all modernized rapidly. Western systems weren't simply handed over. They came with training programs, maintenance protocols, and data-sharing mechanisms that helped Ukraine build a long-term, sustainable capability. Looking ahead, Ukraine's long-range strike abilities will continue to evolve. With Western nations expanding production of missiles, Ukraine could receive more ATACMS, additional Storm Shadow-like weapons, and new European systems like Taurus if political conditions shift. Ukraine is also accelerating its own missile development programs, aiming to produce long-range systems domestically to ensure independence from foreign supply chains. These capabilities will play a central role in deterring future aggression even after the war ends. The journey from early HIMARS strikes to deep penetration Storm Shadow missions tells a story of adaptation, intelligence, and resilience. Ukraine didn't just receive these weapons. It learned to integrate them into a comprehensive strategy that undermined Russia's military momentum and forced the Russian command to rethink its operations. Each phase of this evolution represented a step toward greater precision and greater reach, ultimately reshaping the battlefield in ways few anticipated at the start of the war. This transformation shows how much a determined nation can achieve when technology, strategy, and international cooperation align. Ukraine's long-range strike evolution will be studied for years as an example of rapid modernization under extreme pressure. And while the conflict continues, one thing is clear: the combination of Ukrainian innovation and Western precision technology has become one of the defining factors of the war. Thank you for watching, and thank you for staying with the channel as we continue exploring the major turning points of modern conflict. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to stay tuned for more deep dives into the technologies and strategies shaping today's world.